Everyone. It is July 17th and we are at the Borough Council voting session. But before we get started there, we're going to start with the public hearing regarding the ordinance of the Borough of Westchester, Chester County, amending the code of the Borough of Westchester, Chapter 3, titled Administrative Code, specifically Section 3-25, titled Administrative Purchasing System, to increase the bidding thresholds to be consistent with Act 90 of 2011 and Section 3-26, titled Competitive Bidding System Rules and Regulations, to amend certain sections related to competitive bidding.
So I can start by, just because this is a public hearing and you're amending an ordinance, specifically Chapter 3, which is your administrative code. We had to advertise tonight's hearing. We did so in the Daily Local News on July 9th, 2024. I also sent a copy of the ordinance for public inspection to the Daily Local News and to the Chester County Law Library on June 19th, 2024. And just, I think council understands what this is about, but most other municipalities, non-home rule charter municipalities, so boroughs, second-class townships, first-class townships, and school districts as well, were given, the General Assembly recognized that the inflation has occurred and that the bidding thresholds had to increase. So it originally was $10,000 and then gone higher than that. So now every year, the Department of Labor and Industry, based on the Consumer Price Index and some other factors, increases what the bidding threshold number is. And because you are, your home rule charter and your administrative code had a different rule, it was appropriate to amend that to be consistent with what other municipalities. It lessens the burden in terms of having to go through public procurement processes for things that really are now based on inflation. The threshold is $23,200. That's for 2024. So that number will change in January of 2025. So that's really what it does. Anything over $23,200, you have to go through the public bid process. Anything between $12,600 up to the $23,200 is three price quotations. Anything below the $12,600 is something that is just, you would get proposals for, but you're not required to get the three different competitive proposals. So that's the intent of this.
Any questions or comments from council? Any comments from those in attendance? So do we take this to vote?
It would be appropriate for somebody to make a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Make a motion to adopt the ordinance as stated.
I second.
All right, let's call the question.
Ms. Dorsey? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro is absent. Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy is absent as well. 5-0.
All right, thank you. Now we move on to the Borough Council voting session. It is 6:33 p.m. on July 17th, and we're calling this to order. With that, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Bernie, why don't you lead that first today? Thank you. All right, and wait, I gotta call it. Number 3, comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. State your name and address.
Darrell Cook, 506 South Walnut Street, Westchester, PA. Are any of the High Street bump outs going to be green? Does it rain on High Street? Is anything planned to increase the safety for drivers on High and Minor streets? Paint the curbs, reflectors? Thank you.
Thank you. And any other comments from those in attendance? We'll move on then to the council, and we'll start with Brian McGinnis.
Thank you. I want to remind everyone regarding an event coming up on August the 6th. This is the National Night Out event against crime. That will be at Henderson High School from 5:30 to 8 p.m. And that will feature the Westchester Police Department as well as the West Goshen Police Department, and our paramedics will be there. It's a great opportunity to meet those that serve our community and interact with them. Thank you.
Brian Travis?
Yeah, I just wanted to make an announcement that the Westchester Food Co-op that's been trying to find a permanent home for a long time has just signed a lease. I believe it's on, I don't know the exact address, but I believe it's on Market Street. And I just think it's fantastic news. I have had a lot of neighbors that have been involved in the co-op, and some of them have moved out of the area, but I know that they'll be very happy with the news that they finally have a home. So that's my announcement.
Awesome. All right, Sheila? Oh,
Do you want me to be Sheila? Thanks, Nicole. Brian stole my thunder. I think we sometimes run out of events to promote, but want to encourage everyone to attend National Night Out. It's a annual event that is generally very well attended, and we get to recognize the folks that protect and serve. Also want to thank Nicole Shimoni for standing in for me this month or last week on committee while I was traveling for business. So thank you for that.
all right, Bernie?
Greetings from the sweetest ward in the borough, the 6th Ward. I have a little spin that I want to discuss tonight. With the help of Senator Carolyn Committa and the Westchester Public Works, we tackled the declining population of the state insect in Everhart Park. The firefly, or the lightning bug, is the state insect. And because of the bright lights around the borough, we're asking new developers to consider dark skies. It's a filtered lighting system. I've talked to two of the local developers, and they're considering it now to try to protect the environment around the neighborhoods as well. The population of fireflies in the park was dwindling rapidly because of the LED lights that we have in the park, and as well as along Brandywine Avenue there. One was at the Senator's house and one was Barnard Street. And because of the ability of the borough to lower the light coming out of the LEDs, we were actually able to lower the light without impacting safety on two of the lights that are on the street. And then inside the park, we were able to turn off the one light on the one walkway. And within 6 weeks' time, believe it or not, because I've been meeting down there and going down and watching, it looks like a light show. Because prior to that, there were hardly any fireflies there. And the initiative is being spearheaded by Senator Carolyn Committa. And hopefully in the fall and in the winter, we are so able, because we control each light individually on a grid, we'll raise the intensity of the lights back up during the darker times, and it won't affect the fireflies.
Now I forget, Mayor, do you go first or do I? Who closes it out? Okay. I'll go next.
No, I go next.
Oh,
So, good evening to everyone. Yes, Westchester is abuzz, lots of things going on. Thank you, Brian McGinnis. Yes, we do have, and Lisa Dorsey, we do have National Night Out. And thank you. We do have a new shopping area for groceries in the borough of Westchester, or we will shortly. So the other thing is our own Keith has a upcoming virtual golf event this Friday evening. It will be on Gay Street, where he has two big virtual golf trucks coming in. and you'll be able to come in and go uptown and play golf. So try your hand at golf. So that's Parks and Recreation. So come uptown and enjoy that. He had mini golf a couple of weeks ago, and my grandchildren went in the 90-some degree temperature, and they enjoyed it. And he had a good turnout for the first time. So let's get behind all the work he does and support the virtual golf this Friday evening. Okay, there's a flyer on the door as you go out, so take a picture of it and show up. Thank you.
Thank you. And my thoughts for this month stem from something that happened last week. Last week, there was a little bit of confusion with my trash collection. The men came a little bit earlier than my usual expectations, and it was in their efforts to try to beat the heat, right? Like it's, as we all know, even right now, it's super hot outside. And, that all got cleared up. But what it did was it reminded me, while I go to work and sit in a well air conditioned building, we have a lot of individuals that work for our borough that are out and about in this heat right now, doing all the things that we need to do to keep our borough running, between, collecting trash, safety, parking enforcement, zoning enforcement, all of the things. I probably didn't name them all, but there are a lot of people out there that are doing that, and they're in the heat and they're working for us. And so for that, I want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you out there that are doing all that hard work in this heat to keep us running, and you're very much appreciated. So let's move on to.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
At this time, I would like to amend the agenda to move topic H from consent to discussion.
Okay, so we will, from the consent agenda, we will be moving the motion to approve the base bid and bid alternate for construction of Goose Creek Stormwater Management Facilities, 205 Lacey Street and Matlack Street, for a total bid of $246,848. We will be moving that to item C on the discussion. Any other?
Are we moving item C to discussion?
We're moving item H
Okay.
to, from consent to item C of our discussion.
And I want to move item C on consent. That's the motion to lease parking spaces only in Lot 10 to J. Lowe and Associates to discussion. And so that would be
Okay.
item D.
So we will move item C
To-
from consent to item D. Oh, you should have gone first. That would have been a lot easier, move C to C. But okay, so we're moving item C to item D and item H to item C. Okay, let's get started.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes,
point of order.
okay.
Mr. Metrick, Ms. Camp, point of order. Last night during our work session, there was some confusion over moving items from consent to consent and consent to discussion. And at that particular time, when I asked to move item H into discussion, it was recognized by the chair and acknowledged. And after that, we proceeded as usual, and we had a very good discussion about item H, which sits squarely in Ms. Simone's district. The gentleman from Ward 3 decided to challenge the discussion request. This is an irregular challenge and was wrong and not consistent with the rules of this chamber. I request a clear clarification from management on the rules of engagement for deciding on discussion and consent items.
Anytime there's a question by any member of council or the mayor about a point of order, it's always in order to ask the chairperson the question on the point of order. And it's usually in the moment when it's happening. So it's unusual that we're talking about something that happened last night. But to clarify, any item In order to create a general consent agenda, you need general consensus, which means everybody who is attending the meeting who has a vote, all the council people, I believe mayor too, because mayor participates in debate, have to agree that the item is on consent. If any one member of council or the mayor disagrees with that notion, the item gets moved to discussion, and we end up discussing it tonight on the discussion agenda. So at the end of the business meeting, the same thing happens. A vote gets taken, but it's no longer, it's being considered under our discussion agenda. Does that clarify the point?
It does.
Okay.
So go one step further, no matter who the council person is or the mayor, if they ask for something to be moved to discussion, you do not need a second, and it seamlessly moves to the previous, the next night for discussion.
I think the point is that amending an agenda is different than moving a location of an item on an agenda.
All right, any other questions there?
I have one other question. Once something has been moved off of the consent agenda and put into discussion, can we also take that item after it has been discussed and make it an action item and vote on it? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So if there are no other questions or comments regarding the pre-discussion items, we'll move to our discussion topics. And we'll start with item A, motion to approve a resolution to approve the 5-year police services contract with East Bradford Township.
I believe last night we discussed the substance of this matter, and what we needed was a resolution be prepared to take the proper form of action of council. And that was why that was accomplished in the interim, and you all received that. So there's no substantive change here. We're just changing it to a motion to approve a resolution.
And the reason being is that there's a state law that allows intergovernmental cooperation among political subdivisions, but it specifically says that if you enter such agreements, they have to be approved through either a resolution or an ordinance. And the law actually then goes on and says what should be contained within the resolution. So if you're wondering why some of this language is in there, it's based on the state law that says what should be included. So basically, the point of this is just to approve the intergovernmental agreement, but we're being strict in terms of how we're going about doing that.
All right, any questions from here? Any comments from those in attendance?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution to accept the 5-year police services contract as presented with West Bradford Township.
Second.
Can we call to order or call to, what call question?
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Travis?
Yes.
And Ms. Shimoni?
Yes. All right, item B, motion to approve the request from West Goshen Township for a letter of support for a grant application under the Multimodal Transportation Fund Program.
So I shared this item under other business last night. West Goshen Township is seeking funding through the Multimodal Transportation Fund, which is a program sponsored by the Department of Community and Economic Development. And what they're proposing to do is to replace 2 aging, undersized culverts, which are under Montgomery Avenue, a little bit north of the Parkway Cleaners and McDonald's. It's an area of the roadway that floods pretty often. And they simply are asking for a letter of support. This project's completely contained within West Goshen Township, and they're going to replace it. They're proposing to replace it with 2 box culverts that are going to be sized to handle up to the 10-year storm. So it's going to be good for most rain events. A 10-year storm is a level of rainfall that has a 10% chance of happening in any given year.
I was actually at the West Goshen meeting last evening, and this was a matter of discussion, and it was voted on to authorize that the township engineer, who's Carroll Engineering, prepare the grant application. And one of the members of the Board of Supervisors, Sean Walsh, asked the question of whether or not anybody at the borough, Public Works or the manager had been consulted with about this application because he was concerned that there would be unintended consequences in the borough. So there was a meeting. Sean and Mr. Edwards did meet with representatives from West Goshen Township, but they do still want to make sure that further dialogue is had because their thought and concern was that it's going to increase, it'll just that it's now going to continue down into the borough, and they want to make sure that before it's, as the design is moving on, assuming they get the grant funding, that that is something that really is done in cooperation to make sure that you fully understand what's happening and that more detailed studies are done. So they're very cognizant of the fact that this is, that, the flooding doesn't stop at a municipal boundary. So I thought that was important that you understood that they know that there will be further dialogue and consultation before anything would ever be fully designed or built. And if they get the funding, they think that we won't even know that for 6 to 9 months. And it would be a project that wouldn't happen until probably 2026. So it's a long way off, but it's in the starting process.
Mr. Metrick, did you or Mr. Edwards have any concerns with what was presented and are relatively confident that the flooding or runoff will not further impact, it's not going to get worse, it's going to get better?
Our conclusion at this point is that this project will make the roadway roadway passable in more storms, but it's not going to affect the volume of water that's coming into the borough because the existing culverts are so clogged right now and have so little capacity that even the most modest rainstorms, the roadway is overtopped by that water anyway, and it's already coming into the borough. So there really is not going to be any change in the volume or velocity of water coming. That's our initial thoughts on this. The flooding won't get worse, but the roadway will get better. The roadway will become more passable in more levels of storms.
Thank you.
Ms. Camp, the design that they talked about over there for the 10-year floodplain, when Diane Hearn was mayor, we had multiple meetings in the back parking lot of McDonald's with PennDOT, state senators, local reps, the whole bit. And the major problem was that the culvert underneath kept getting clogged, and PennDOT was supposed to clean it, which they don't, okay? And we all know that's why it's part of the problem. The talk was to raise the road, to put a hump in the road. Was that discussed at all over there?
No, they're going to, instead of raising the road, they're going to lower the culvert. They're going to lower the 2 10-foot culverts. So there was discussion about lowering it. There was also discussion, because again, another member was concerned that this isn't fixing it 100%. You would design it to the 100-year storm, but to design it to the 100-year storm requires a bridge, and that's just not going to happen. So they recognize that this is really the best that you can do without making it a really crazy expensive project that, they can't afford. So they thought that this was the best solution for a problem that they know needs fixed. And there was a lot of discussion about the fact that the flooding happens because the culverts that are there are being blocked with trees and debris. And there was questions about making sure that they'll be properly maintained. And the director of the street department was there last evening and just basically said, yeah, once this is in, this is something that's always on our radar. Anytime we know that there's storm coming, we go out and clear them. After the storms, we go out and clear them. So I just think there's a lot more awareness, of what needs to be done. So.
Any other questions from up here, from council? Question? Yes.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. How close to this building we're in now does that water flow across the street?
Yeah, it passes between DK Diner and the Gateway Shopping Plaza parking lot.
And where's it go from there?
All right, any other questions, comments from those in attendance?
Make a motion that we support the letter of support for West Goshen Township for the grant for the Multimodal Transportation Fund Program.
I'll second that.
All right, Sean, can we call to question?
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn? Mr. McGinnis? Mr. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
It's 5-0.
All right, now we will move to item C, which is the motion to approve the base bid, $176,116, and bid alternate, $70,732 for construction of Goose Creek Stormwater Management Facilities, 205 Lacey Street and Matlack Street, for a total bid amount of $246,848.
Chair, the gentleman from the Sixth Ward asked this to be put back on discussion. And the reason, I had 3 or 4 questions that concerned me about the project, because this is not the first time we've been putting in rain gardens or cisterns around the borough to try to slow or collect the water. Down in that area, as we all know, it floods drastically. And we have to do something to mitigate it. My concerns were about the residents down in that area. And I did mention it to Vice President Simone. As we go and put rain gardens in, the right of way and up against residential curbs, I'm concerned that most of the houses in the borough receive their water lines and their sewer lines through the front of their properties. And if these houses, they're on the corners, and we know there's 25 feet one way, 25 feet another way, I want to make sure that someone's paying attention, that we don't disturb the utilities, Mr. Metrick. You know, that was one of my main concerns, because, and I asked Ms. Camp earlier about when we put the rain garden in, because it butts up to the curb, and the homeowner's responsible for the curb. So wherever we own from the front of our house to either the curb or to the middle of the cartway. So are we going to assume the responsibility, Mr. Metrick, for the curb wherever the rain garden is? So the homeowner doesn't have to worry about freeze thaw in that area. That was one of my major concerns there. Not against rain gardens, I like them. I'm hoping I get one on my street, but right in front of my house also is my utilities, you know, so have we taken those things into consideration? Or is it too soon?
Utility surveys are done as part of planning and design. So that was done, and if you, that should be on the plans, and we're not putting these on top of utility lines. And curbs that are built into the right of way, those would become the responsibility of the borough to maintain.
The rain gutters, the rain gardens, we know that they do clog, and because of the type of debris that goes down the street. Do we have to give a waiver to the homeowner in the event that rain garden clogs and it fills their basement full of water because of the rain garden, if it overflows? Because we are causing an impediment there, and if it clogs, it wouldn't have clogged before, it would have blown right past the house. But if it runs backwards into the people's property, what happens?
Kristen has an opinion too, but I'm thinking about this question more broadly, like what responsibility do we have about water that runs off any of our infrastructure?
So
That's what you're asking.
We're
Because I
calling-
don't think a
Yeah.
rain garden's going to leak into somebody's basement, but you're talking about runoff from.
No, I'm not worried about the runoff. I'm worried about something clogging, because they do get full of debris. There's one right out here that if the neighbor didn't take care of it by Fugit Park, the thing wouldn't drain.
I think as a general rule, the borough is immune, there's sovereign immunity that's granted to political subdivisions. There are exceptions to that. So to the extent that the borough was on notice and had knowledge that one of these rain gardens was clogging, needed to be maintained, and you ignored that, and as a result of ignoring that known condition, it caused damage to somebody's property, potentially they would have a negligence claim against the borough. But the general rule is that the borough is sovereign immune.
And the last question was the easements. The two rain gardens that we're putting down here, one's next to an old store and one's next to a field. In the event that around the borough, not just these here, but around the borough, do we have to give it, because we are stepping into the right of way of the property owner? They own from the front door to the middle of the street. Every place we put a rain garden, do we have to give them an easement, something in writing saying that we have to maintain it? Like St. Agnes had to do over in the alley.
Yeah, no. The principle is the opposite of what you're thinking. The borough owns the right of way to place roadway and public infrastructure, sometimes on private property, sometimes the private property. You can go out and you can probably figure out by doing deed research that some property lines go to the center of the street and some don't. It's a mixed bag, especially in an old town like this. The borough owns the right of way of a certain width that's defined somewhere in an ordinance passed by people generations before you all that defines how wide that right of way is. And then in that right of way, the borough can place whatever infrastructure it deems possible.
So when you think of the word right of way, think of right to use. So we have, or an easement, the borough has the right to use what they own in what's called fee simple absolute. So if your deed is described to the center line of the road in front of your home, you own that land. But the borough has the right to use what is the right of way, whatever that's designated as, 33 feet, 50 feet, whatever. And that is a mixed bag depending on the road. The borough has the right to use that to put infrastructure in related to road, drainage, utilities, poles, things like that, traffic lights. The borough has the right to use that. So the instances where these rain gardens are being placed within what is borough right of way, there's no easement needed. That easement already exists in the form of the borough's right of way.
My last question is, where we put rain gardens around the borough, do we have a meeting with the resident to tell them what's happening in their right of way or in their easement area or directly in front of their front door? I know that they can't park there because most of the time the rain gardens are in the 25-foot range. But do we meet with the residents and inform them that next year there's going to be, a concrete cistern in the ground, a rain garden collecting water in front of your house? Or do we just show up and do it?
We haven't done what you're describing as part of our practice yet. No.
Mr. Metric, approximately how many of these rain gardens have we installed? I mean, given these new questions, we've got a few, I know. Got them here in
How many exist in the borough today?
approximately.
Approximately, I'd say 15.
Madam Chair, I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the Borough Council? Oh, not yet. We gotta give.
I do have a question is for procedure. We can make a motion to put this back on consent. All right, I want to make a motion to approve that item.
Well,
Fee.
I think I need to let, residents talk. Okay. Right, all right, we'll let Daryl talk, yes.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. Where are they going to put the snow? And again, reminders, the postal vehicle and other delivery vehicles typically park at the end where no other cars park. Thank you.
Yeah, well, the parking for the postal vehicle, I do know we allow our postman to park in our parking area that's right around the corner from that spot where the gardens are going to go. So he'll still be able to park there. And because we have parking and during the day, people are at work, so he does park there. I've seen his car many times and no big deal. So the snow, I'm assuming we've got Lacey Street, and if we get a big pile of snow, I will be excited. But we'll have Public Works right there next door, so they will make sure that it's cleared out in a proper way.
I can tell you they put the snow in Hoops Park.
Snowmen in Hoops Park. That's where we got to have a contest then. Hoops Park. Keith,
Every
Keith,
year.
where are you?
Every year I see how long it's going to take the snow to melt. They call it Hoops Mountain.
All right. Any other comments, questions from those in attendance? All right.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the new item C, motion to approve the base bid and bid alternate for construction of Goose Creek stormwater management facilities.
All right. Sean, can you call the question?
Ms. Dorsey? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
5-0.
All right, let's move to item D, motion to lease 3 parking spaces only in Lot 10 to J. Lowe and Associates until leases expire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And last night, it seemed that there was some confusion regarding this particular item. And I think it needs a little bit more thought, maybe to go back to the parking committee. So I'd like to make a motion to table that, the lease of the parking spaces in Lot 10 back to the August parking committee for further discussion.
Can I just ask what the confusion is? This will be August will be the 3rd month that we've discussed Lot 10.
Right. I think that there is discussion regarding the agreement. I believe that agreement, and I don't want to mix up my words, was more of a verbal agreement rather than a written agreement moving forward. And I think we've discussed before about getting these things in written agreements.
Right, and I think Mr. Lowe last night acknowledged that there wasn't a lease, a signed lease for the 58, the 20, amended 20 spaces. So I still ask where the confusion is.
I think the confusion lies, and there's a total of 53 spaces, I think, and they wanted at least 3 of them, or Ramsey's suggestion was 3. However, they might be fluctuating with that, and I think that maybe going to parking, going back to Mr. Lowe, and hopefully coming to agreement and then a written agreement would make more sense for Lot 10.
So I can help provide some clarification. Lowe had 53. It was amended to 20 of the previous council, and they're only using 3 for leases that they have in their building. They're paying for 20. They'd like to continue using the 3. The ask was, as those 3 leases expire, leases to their building that include the 3 parking spaces, that those parking spaces then move to Chestnut Street Garage.
That was, I believe, the outcome of that conversation. That is correct. That happened the other night, but I don't believe that this was discussed during parking. I don't believe there was a parking committee meeting this past month because due to a lack of quorum.
I also received a call today from Mr. Lowe's counsel, who indicated that he has email communication and other evidence that we should be considering or that council should consider, that they believe that the action taken in October of 2018, where council agreed to give a right of first refusal, I think there's a disagreement between my office and his counsel as to what that meant and what the legal rights are with respect to that. He sent that to me at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So I had asked that I be given an opportunity to make sure that I did not have that when I prepared this memo for council in terms of what that October 2018 action meant. And I just, in an abundance of caution, I want to make sure that I thoroughly evaluate Mr. Lowe's counsel's position and then give a recommendation, attorney-client privilege recommendation to the parking committee. So again, he was asserting that they might take certain action to recoup funds paid. And I said, well, I think that's ridiculous, but I'll obviously listen and review whatever emails or written communication you think gives you a right to have 53 spaces, 20 spaces, whatever it is. But given that he did not send that to me until 4 o'clock this afternoon, I was not able to thoroughly review it and then analyze it based on the different legal matters. They agree that there's not a lease, but there are other doctrines in the law, justifiable reliance. There's other doctrines that they may try to assert that gives them an opportunity to continue having more than 3 spaces or to request refunding money. So I think it made sense to take a step back and evaluate those claims before council fully votes on this.
That additional context certainly helps versus I'm confused. I'm sorry, Mr. McGinnis.
Listen,
but-
I was trying to get there. Thank you, Kristen. I was trying to get there. All right.
So, okay,
Kristen?
understood.
Yeah, thank you. Kristen, I do have a question. We sit up here and we go through an agenda and we do a consent and we vote on the consent agenda. That's pretty much what happened in 2018, if my memory is correct, about the parking spaces that Mr. Nagel is talking about. I know you didn't have to mention him. But besides yourself, he's the only lawyer that works in the borough besides you and Mr. Nagel. We did that, I believe, in a council meeting around 2018. So what makes that less binding? Because it was the rule of council to go from 53 to 20, and we voted on it, and it became part of the public record. So where does that get canceled? You know, and how can we cancel that and override and say one council can't supersede whatever another council does?
So, Mr. Flynn, it's very confusing because there are certain, under the law, a specific council cannot bind a future council depending on what the action is. And it's a distinction on whether it's a governmental function or proprietary function. And in this instance, again, it requires further analysis. So I'm not prepared to provide an answer to that question. And that's why, again, you know, there's all kind of doctrines of law that property rights. So leasing property spaces is a property right. Those types of things typically need to be in writing. And if they're not, then there's other defenses and things. So I would like the opportunity to thoroughly analyze this and potentially have an executive session with council on it, to be quite honest.
I support Mr. McGinnis's request.
So there's a motion on the floor. I'll second it.
So I have a question though, before you start talking motions. So now I'm confused because Ramsey has been working on this for quite a while. This is not something new. So I don't understand why you did not weigh in before this.
I did weigh in, but their counsel did not provide me any of the documents, nor did Ramsey have them.
Provided the documents. You're saying Lowe has not provided the documents.
That's right. The documents that Mr. Nagel sent me at 4, I just got at 4.
Giving them an opportunity to not, and they haven't provided the documents, then it's, at some point, this borough needs to move on. So I think it was you who said yesterday evening, Mr. Flynn, that the previous council of which you were a part never put it in writing, and that was part of the problem. And so you even apologized to Mr. Lowe because of that. However, it's not in writing. And, you know, we have a parking director who's trying to kind of round up all these ancillary and miscellaneous contracts and all of that across the borough and kind of make them clear and make them transparent and so that everyone knows what's going on. And so she had a plan in place, and I don't understand if they haven't provided the information needed, why this plan can't be implemented. Now, the parking committee did not meet, but also you decided last night, because council was here, that we could discuss it as a council, because even though it was brought up in last week, it wasn't discussed by the parking committee, but the full complement of council was here, minus the two people that are still not here. But it was discussed yesterday. So if we've discussed it, and if she's planned it, and if you've weighed in, why are we revisiting this again?
Let me see if this, because we were sent a bunch of documents today. So that's, I think the difference, it's no longer, nothing was sent. There was something sent today that Kristen wants to look at.
Yeah. Communication between representatives of the borough and Mr. Lowe. And they also threatened to sue the borough for reimbursement of funds paid. So before would anyone would want to have a litigation matter, filed, it's worth discussing. You always have an opportunity to try to talk to the other party and see if there's a common ground that avoids any sort of lawsuit.
I mean, from my perspective, it makes no sense to hold hostage an entire parking lot for 3 spaces. Prime parking in lot 10 is prime parking for 3 spaces when they can be moved to another place. For a company that doesn't have a lease and has no need for it at this point in time. I mean, you can revisit it later on when they actually have a need, and you can put it in writing and memorialize it then. But now to hold hostage an entire parking lot? No.
And I think those of us sitting up here with you agree that it's not a great situation. But I also think that at this point, we just want to make sure that Kristen does her due diligence based off of new information that she received today. And one more month to allow her to do that due diligence, I'm okay with. And my hope and my belief is that, well, once she does her work and her job, we will come to the same conclusion, but we just need that extra month to dot our i's and cross our t's. But agree that we shouldn't be just letting this parking lot sit so 3 spaces can get used during the workday.
I mean, it's very kind of council to allow someone at the 11th and a half hour to send in new documentation. But, this is a kind council.
Mr. Metric, I think we have to call the question there to move it to parking.
There is a motion and a second on the table, and I'm hearing a member of council call the question, so. we're good.
Okay, I
Madam
wasn't sure
Chair?
where our motions had landed, but okay, we got 2
Yeah,
motions.
Mr.
Two
McGinnis
Brian.
made the motion and Mr. Travis seconded the motion to table and refer to the parking committee this matter for the August parking committee.
Okay. All right, so let's call this to question.
Sure. Ms. Dorsey? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni? That's 4-1 in favor.
All right, I believe that was the entire discussion agenda, so we are on the consent agenda as amended earlier this evening.
Make a motion to accept the amended consent agenda?
Second.
All right, let's call to question.
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah.
Mr. McGinnis? Mr. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
5-0.
Any other business?
Yes.
Bring it.
Yeah, since it's early. Uh, I, I have a concern. We are doing new agendas, which I think are wonderful. But it's a question I've had in my head every time someone comes up that is not on the agenda and they pose a question, like Darrell does often and other people. When do you address those questions and how? Because you don't address them at that point in time when they ask them. But many times they're valid questions. And I'd like to know what is the protocol and when you address those questions that they have.
Can I answer that? I had a recommendation for it. If we can answer the question as it's being presented, I think that's the best case. If we need to come back with an answer, it should be the following meeting. And there's an item on the new agenda where we address questions from the audience, previous questions in old business.
So I would just ask for a point of clarification because when I was relatively new to council and borough manager at the time, Mike Perone, and we would have folks raise items that were not on the agenda. And we were instructed as a council that we could not address them that night because they were not on the agenda, that they could be moved to a committee meeting, to a subsequent meeting, but that because they were not discussion items that had been published, that we could not discuss them. So I'm just going by what we were instructed by the previous borough manager.
I think it depends on what it is. If somebody asks you a question that's just a factual question, wanting information, I think if you have the information, I like Brian's idea that if you have the answer, provide it. The person's here, they took the time to come to your meeting, you have the answer. A lot of times you don't have the answer. So you might have to say, I'll get back to you. It doesn't necessarily need to come back to a public meeting to answer the question. You could instruct your staff who might have the appropriate answer to answer it. Where I think Mr. Perone was talking was you can't, if somebody raises an issue or asks you to consider something that would require you to take a vote and official action, that is not permitted to be added to your agenda. And in fact, since the time, the Sunshine Law was actually amended through Act 65 that has this 24-hour requirement that you can't put onto your agenda something that wasn't posted on the agenda 24 hours. And then there was subsequent case law that talked about even tightening up the amendment process to an agenda. So rules have been a little bit more stringent. But I think it's one of those things that it really depends on what is being brought forward in a question or a matter for you to consider. If somebody from the public came forward and said, I'd really like you to consider doing this public improvement on, some park you have, Everhart Park, you could say, thank you, we'll take that under advisement, or we'll get more information for you. You could instruct maybe Keith or your manager to go and have another meeting with that person. And then maybe at some point in time, it becomes an agenda item. So it really depends on what's being asked of you. The question tonight, if somebody knew the answer to that question, or if somebody on staff knew the answer, the person leading the meeting could say, staff, does anybody have the answer to that question? And then it's appropriate to provide that answer. But one other thing, and I say this a lot, councils don't have to feel like every question or every comment needs a response. It's an opportunity for public to ask a question or make a public comment, but there's nothing under the law that obligates a response. So that's also something I think to keep in mind.
To Ms. Dorsey's point, Ms. Camp, Mr. Perone was very emphatic that it was a state, came down from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that we were not to interact with conversation. We were just to listen and not deliberate stuff. So I guess that's changed the way Michael did not want us to engage in dialogue because it was something off the cuff, the people show up. So.
I think, again, it's somebody came to your meeting and has a comment for you to consider. If you have a response back that you feel is appropriate, I think you're not asking for somebody to take a vote on anything. You're just providing a response back. I think it is a matter on your agenda, public comment. So I think it can elicit a response from somebody on council to the extent you feel it's appropriate.
And so then if it is a question that can be answered and we answer it, But, to your point, we don't always have to respond. However, I think if it is a question, somewhere along the line, it should get answered, or someone should at least say, you'll need to take that in front of the ACT committee or the smart growth. But to sit there and look at them and then not to be able to say, address a question if there's no answer, I think that in itself shows a lack of what's your word, Nicole?
Passion?
Com-
I don't know. Responsiveness?
Interest
Yeah.
maybe in their question. But to Mr. Flynn's point, is that in fact some sort of state ruling that we're not to address any questions during that part of the agenda?
Said I disagree. I think that you can,
Uh,
because it's a public comment that is on your agenda. If somebody asks a question, I think, again, any member of council can provide a response or direct somebody on staff to provide a response. You're not, by answering that question, you're not adding something to your agenda that you're going to be taking official action on. That would be appropriate. That would be inappropriate, excuse
Yes,
me.
I did hear your answer. My specific question was this some sort of state law that he said, Perone said?
I think it's just the way he interpreted it, the way he was interpreting the Sunshine Law.
To that point, to the mayor, Dana, wasn't that notice used to be hanging on that corkboard out there about public comment from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or some sort like that? Wasn't there a notice hanging there that we received from the Commonwealth? Can you opine on that? Tell us what that meant, or do you remember?
Yeah, I just want to chime in on it because I did send this to Mr. Travis. That and Ms. Camp, you're right. I mean, this actually took place it was decided by the Commonwealth Court in November of 2023. So, for example, we cannot amend the agenda unless a certain criteria is met. One of the, and I'll read the three of them. One of them would be a potential emergency and a clear and present danger to life or property. The other one would be a matter that does not involve the expenditure of funds or entering into a contract. The third item would be almost the same thing. However, that would be raised by a resident. And if all three of those criteria are met, then it has to go to a formal vote of council in order to amend the agenda. So, I could send this in an email. We can put that in publicly. But I think whenever there's comments at meetings, I try to interact. I think it depends who runs the meeting.
So I think the moral of the story is, Daryl, get your list together. Anything we haven't answered over the past, I don't know how long, come on back and we'll give our best try next month. I think you tend to come with a lot of questions. You have any questions for us now?
Thank you.
I
Don't
answered the
tell us
snow
no.
question.
All right, any other business? All right, we're packing up back here, so I think this meeting is adjourned at 7:28. Thank you all.